Hello everyone. This week we're going to talk about CSV files. So I know previously we talked about JSON files, and a lot of times learning about this is lumped together. But I wanted to do APIs and JSON first. But CSV files, or comma separated value files, are files with rows and columns of data that represent essentially a data table, what you would see in Excel or Access or relational database. Here on the screen I have an example where I have rows of information, and each row represents essentially a person. We have a first name and a last name and an email address and a date of birth. And each of these columns of data are separated by commas, hence the name comma separated values. Now, why is this important for Python as well as cybersecurity? Again, this is a pseudo or a de facto standard. A lot of times people don't have Excel or want an easy way to process rows of information outside of a relational database, and CSV files are a quick and simple way of doing so. Also, if you're looking to exfiltrate data, CSV files are a great way to do it. So this week we're going to talk about reading CSV files. I also encourage you to learn how to write CSV files in the chapter, but we're going to focus on reading them right now. So how does this work? So Python has a built-in module called CSV. Nothing to import this week via pip. So go ahead and you can open up a Python file and type in import CSV. So the first step is we need to open a file stream. Now I have this contacts.csv file saved in the same directory as this Python file. So I'm going to create a variable contacts file equals open contacts.csv. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a file stream from the file contacts.csv, and I'm placing it into the context file variable. And now we can use the reader object off of the CSV module. So we'll create contacts reader equals CSV dot reader contacts file to read in the CSV data into the context reader variable. So now we want to read each row of data, and we want to read each column of data. So we can go ahead and if we want to read each row, for instance, let's print to the screen. So for row in contacts reader, print row and then we can use the contacts. All right, so how does this work? So the CSV reader, context reader that we've opened and imported the file stream context file, that has essentially a tracker for every row that we're on. So as we iterate through, it increments line num. So essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to print to the screen what current row we're on. So every time we read a row, it increments line num, and then we're going to print the row out. to the screen. So let's save this file. Switch to the directory, Python, what did I call this file? Read CSV, and we'll go ahead and hit enter. Oh, my bad. Always remember, you gotta convert. So remember, line number's an integer, so I have to convert it to a string. So let's try this again. I'll run the Python file. Did I not save it? Nope. Losing twice today. All right, there we go. So how does this work? So we saw our file before. Let's flip back to that. We see each of these rows of data. First name, last name, email, date of birth, right? And there's 3 lines or 3 rows, 4 columns to each row. So if we pop back into the command prompt, we see here that, zoom in a little bit, we're iterating through each row, and I have row 1 data, and it's a list. So index 0 is the first name, index 1 is the last name, index 2 is the email address, and index 3 is the date of birth. So you can think of this as a list of lists. So we don't necessarily have to loop through everything. So let me just go back here, and I'm going to comment all this out. Oh, wrong language. There we go. You always got to remember which language you're in today. All right, so let's say we just wanted to print the first name out of the first row. Print. So we're going to take contacts reader, and essentially what we can do is, let me go back. We're going to convert it to a list. So contacts equals list. So we're going to explicitly convert contacts reader to a list. And now we're going to print contacts list, row, the first column, and save this, and this should print Matt to the screen. There we go. So what did this do if we go back to our CSV file? So you see here I converted it to a list. So that's one of the features of CSV Reader. So when you have a CSV Reader object, you can run the list object conversion, and it'll turn it into a list of lists. So I've done that. That's what this line does, line 5. And then I can say, okay, take the contacts list, give me row 0, and in row 0, give me column 0. So the first row, first column. So if we jump back here, first row, it says line 1, but remember, lists start at 0. And column, this is column 1, but columns start at 0. Everything again starts with 0, so I subtract 1. Row 0, column 0 is Matt. Now if I do row 1, so here line 2, column 1, we should get example daughter. So Sue's last name. So let's switch back. So row, the second row, the second column. Save this, run it again, and there we go. So that is how you explicitly access the rows. So let's go back to this again. So that's how to convert it to a list. Let's say we wanted to So we have each row. Let's say we wanted to print out all of the first names. Or, sorry, all the email addresses. Let's say we want every email address. So we have our row object. So let's go back. So we're going to want to print something here. Where is the email address? First, second, it's in the third column. So we go back to our code. That's going to be 2 right here. So now if we save this file, what is it going to do? It's opening up the CSV file, converting it to a CSV reader, and then iterating through every row, and we're going to print the email to the screen because it's in the third column, 1, 2, 3, which means index 2. So save this file. We're going to run it again, and you see we've grabbed all of the email addresses out of the CSV file.